there's nothing in there, Jim.
I know.
What is that?
Well, I just simply wanted to show that out of a simple contraption, that of course is recyclable, you can make a pitfall trap or another kind of a trap just for monitoring insect pests, and you don't have to go buy them from the catalog. Say, for example, you have fruit fly issues. There's a spotted winged fruit fly that we suspect might eventually come into Nebraska, so this would be an ideal trap for that. If you want to use it for a pitfall trap, you just dig a little cylindrical hole in the turf grass. Maybe you suspect some kind of insects like army worms or chinch bugs or whatever, and you just simply take one of these pop or soda bottles and cut it in half right there, and the upper part becomes the funnel. You invert it, put it down in there. It's got a narrow little hole. Either clip it or tape it or something like that. Put a little attractant, maybe soapy water down below, and set it out. Now, if you're going to attract fruit flies, you make it nice and fruity and throw some yeast in there and let it ferment real good, and just let it set for a while, and you can see what you have. It's a monitoring device.
That's
so
pretty cool.
Very inexpensive. You can use 2-liter bottles. You can use heavy-duty plastic bottles of different kinds, but just make sure that the funnel itself has a narrow opening to it, because then the insects that fly in there can't get out.
Cool.
So pitfall trap or just a simple trap for catching insects that you might be suspicious of.
Very cool. All right, Zach, green and growing, grassy.
Yes, green and growing. With the frigid temperatures that we've been having, there's not a lot growing in the lawns right now, but there's actually a fair amount of weeds. And what I have here is downy brome, which is a winter annual, and so it germinated last fall and survived all winter. And then with the cool temperatures, it's really growing aggressively right now. And you can tell downy brome by its name. I don't know how close you can get in on this, but really small set of lots of small hairy small hairs along the stem, and that's downy brome. It's a winter annual, and so that is going to die here if it ever gets warm. It's probably going to die end of May, 1st of June or so, and so there's really not much control. With as thin as the turf is now, we have lots and lots of weed problems. This is just one of them.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Zach. Kevin, I know that you have promised us you won't take that out of the bag.
I already did, Kim.
Ooh. Uh-oh.
It's out of the bag.
I apologize. Garlic can smell nasty enough on its own, but what I have here is a clove. I have a healthy clove in my left hand, and I have a clove suffering from a bacterial rot on the end of this knife. So our bulbs are still in the ground, and they're having trouble coming up given the temperatures, and so they're susceptible to a lot of the bacterial rots and fungal rots that the pathogens that live in our soil. So one of the telltale signs of this disease is, of course, you'll have poor germination, poor stands, and when you pull a bulb up from the soil, or a clove rather, if you squeeze it, a healthy clove will be nice and turgid and hard, and an infected clove will be soft and squishy, and you can see the water soaking. You can see it's kind of got a liquid appearance to it, and of course, it smells absolutely terrible. So bacterial rot this is garlic, but this also infects onion, and any of your bulbs or corms that are still in the ground right now and haven't come up yet are
So before the panel throws up, put that back in the bag,
Get it
would
away.
you please? Thanks, Kevin. All right, Jeff, yours is beautiful and smells good or
Much
not
better.
at all.
I don't know if it really smells, but and it's maybe not gorgeous, but we've all talked about the fact that there's not a lot flowering right now. And so one of the things that is flowering are Cornelian cherry dogwood, which is, depending on how you want to treat it, it starts off as a nice sized shrub, gets big, and maybe eventually becomes a small tree. So we have a lot of shrubs that will someday do that if you let them get big enough, and this is one of them. So it flowers now. It's a reliable flower for our area, more reliable than forsythia or anything else. Year in and year out, this will flower. These flowers then become a tart cherry fruit, which is marginally edible. I eat them. Not many people do. Hasn't killed me yet. But you can make jams and jellies and syrup. So culturally in Eastern Europe, that's what they do with them.
Excellent.
Then it has nice fall color. And
Does it precede Forsythia or at the same time?
You know, a little before, and it's still going because of our temperatures. They're all
Right.
going right now. So
There's also a cultivar called Golden Glory that is narrow, so it's much narrower than the big guy. That's a great plant. All right, one of the things that we're going to do that's a little out of the ordinary for the show is, since our weather is most definitely out of the ordinary, each one of the panelists is going to give us a little bit of a 2-3 sentence thing on what we should expect with our strange temperatures. You know, it's 20 degrees, 30 degrees colder than normal, it's still snowing. So we're just going to go right down the row and say, okay, what can we expect?
Right, I would say delayed emergences of insects, and we're probably going to be quite well delayed 2 or 3 weeks. And so that, in some ways, that may be a blessing, but I mean, everybody already wants to see butterflies, and nothing's really going to come out early, including those beneficials or the beautiful butterflies, until the temperatures get to be about 60, 70, or consistently in the 60s and 70s.
All right, thanks, Jim. Zach, you've mentioned weeds.
Yeah, lots of weeds. Our cool season grasses should be fine. They'll germinate, or they will come out of dormancy, and they will be fine. Anything that was seeded last fall, or during the winter, or dormant seeded, or during the spring, the germination is going to be really, really slow. And what that does, it really shrinks the window between germination and, in theory, the heat of summer. And so that's going to make for really probably susceptible seedlings to water stress, diseases, and continuing weeds. And so it's just more bad news after last year's drought. I sound like a
Okay.
Debbie Downer, but I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay, Kevin, any idea on rots and spots?
Yeah, you know, we have quite a bit of moisture in the soil, and this last winter we didn't have our ground froze for a very extended period of time. So a lot of our soil inhabiting fungi and bacteria that are bad for plants, our pathogens, I suspect, if we continue to see moisture, could be a problem for our seedlings, and we could expect some root and crown rots to occur. Another thing too, as the season progresses, a lot of our evergreens have died because of the drought during the winter, and so we have a lot of dead limbs and a lot of dead trees and shrubs, and those are reservoirs for insects and pathogens. So we might want to start cleaning those areas up to reduce any disease for the trees that did happen to make it.
All right, thanks, Kevin. And the beauty and the beast of horticulture, Jeff?
That's just people are dragging me down. So upside is, because of the way our spring is, we're going to have probably compressed flowering. So a lot of us plant things to, you know, this flowers this week, that next week, blah, blah, blah. So we'll probably have a couple, 2 or 3 weeks of spectacular flowering when everything's going to be flowering about the same time with our trees and shrubs. So that's the upside. And the other upside is because your trees have disease and you've got lots of weeds and things are dying, you have opportunity to go to the garden center and pick out some new plants and change things.
Which should be probably a really amazing thing once the weather finally
Yeah.
straightens up. You won't be able to get near any place,
Yeah.
which is good.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. I'm sure we'll talk more about this with our viewers as we see what does happen with the weather. Jim, you get the first question and the first set of images tonight, and these I think are compliments actually of Wayne.
Okay.
We had viewers, we've talked about borers, and we have beautiful insects, 3 of
Yes,
them.
indeed. There's one there. That's the banded ash borer.
And then 2 and 3, and then are they good or bad guys?
Painted hickory borer. Well,
Yeah.
you know, as adults, they're pretty, so that's the good side.
Yeah, there we go.
And then, this is red-headed ash borer. And generally speaking, yes, they are detrimental to trees. The reason why we see them now is because they've been just under the bark as a pupal stage, and as soon as it gets just a little bit warm, then they'll chew through that bark, and then they'll be out and about. And so we'll be expecting that to happen as we get well into May. And so it's just one of those things where if you see them, then you know, check your trees out, the bases of your trees. There's a variety of different trees, hardwood trees that can be affected. And if you see any new emergence holes, exit sawdust, that kind of thing. And then just make sure that you treat that tree with either, I like to use bifenthrin because it's longer, it has more longevity to it, but soak it up good along the base of the tree and the trunks, and that'll help to prevent reinfestation. So you'll miss the beauty of those beetles when you do that, but
you'll
that's
keep your
probably a
trees.
wise thing to do, yeah.
All right, thanks, Jim. All right, Zach, you get the next one. And The viewer on this one said this is they think it's a sedge. It has a triangular cross section of the foliage. The undersides are silver. It is evergreen. It is flowering presently. And the question in general is, all right, so if you're using sedgehammer to treat nut sedge, is sedgehammer going to take out the ornamental sedges as well? There's the flower.
Yeah, it's hard to tell if it's a sedge or not, but sedges always have edges, as they say, and so it's a triangular stem, and so odds are it is a sedge. And if it's around right now, it wouldn't be your typical yellow nut sedge, which is probably the biggest weed, the largest weed that we have in Nebraska lawns, in my opinion. And so my guess it's a ornamental weed, like Kim said, or I'm sorry, an ornamental sedge. An ornamental sedge. And if you're going to if you're controlling any of the yellow nut sedge around it, odds are you're going to do a number on that ornamental sedge. So if you like it there, don't come close to it with sedgehammer or dismiss or any of the yellow nut sedge products.
All right, thanks, Zach. All right, Kevin, you have a picture from a viewer who is growing seedlings inside on a major scale. They have purchased a cheap greenhouse. They have a heating device. They did newspaper pots and used coco coir for the planting medium. They planted the seeds. They set up the germination. And they're in a panic because they are seeing mold on the newspaper, and they want to know, is it a problem for the health of the seedlings, or what should they do?
No, the fungi that's causing that is the reason that we suggest using newspaper for these kinds of things. The reason you don't have to dig up and remove the pots. The pots degrade because of that fungus. The fungus isn't a plant pathogen. It's just utilizing the carbon source inside the newspaper or any bits of dead wood that might be in the soil that you're using. And it'll grow and sporulate and look fuzzy on that, but it's not a plant pathogen, and so the seedlings shouldn't be at any risk.
Wonderful. So really just watch for damping off, Rob, probably, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, excellent. All right, Jeff, your turn for one. This is a viewer in downtown Fairbury. Okay. Commercial building. Bradford pear planted in 1980 in one of those dreadful little spots. Beautiful, obviously, he took this in the snow. Lived 33 years, lost some branches, had it cut down. Finally, there was a water line, all sorts of things. Okay. Big old trunk.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Wonders whether he can replant another Bradford pear in the same place, or does he have to switch tree species because of issues with the trunk or the root system, and is Bradford a good choice?
I don't think, you're going to stump grind and clean that out, and I would suggest that you do a good job of removing that soil and bringing in fresh soil, fresh compost, that sort of thing anyway. So I think that'll eliminate some of those concerns, but you guys might have some ideas when you come to that. But, Bradford probably wouldn't be my top choice. There's Chanticleer, there's Red Spire, there's Cleveland Select, which is kind of one of the same. And so there are some improved pear varieties out there that we can look at. I think they mentioned Ivory Silk Lilac, that's another. There's some tree lilacs. So there's some choices of ornamental small trees, and even ginkgo, which is a very popular and useful street tree. So you have some choices.
So you get the next round of pictures, I think, Jim. Last week, Fred brought in, or you brought in, a chunk of wax.
Sure.
Big old chunk of wax that was Zimmerman pine moth. We have people who send in pictures of pines, and they're wondering if that's what they're seeing, and could you repeat the spray?
When they're large clumps like that, it's probably Zimmerman pine moth. And we talked earlier about the weather and how things are delayed a little bit, and so by the calendar to apply a borer spray from April 15th at least yet to the end of the month. That's the so-called treatment window for the tiny little caterpillars that will soon be boring into the pine tree, and so they're very small now and very susceptible. So that's the time to do it. But I would say watch and wait and just take a look at. There shouldn't be any new borer exudate or resin patches like that. But yeah.
So is that window moved?
I suspect that we can go well into the end of the month, perhaps even the 1st of May, unless things pop really fast and it gets warm, and a number of these insects are ready to do that once the weather is conducive.
All right, thanks, Jim. All right, Zach, you have the next set of pictures. This is a viewer who thinks these are violets. And there are two images. One is the bitty little seedlings. They think those are the just emerging little seedlings. And then I think they have some clumps next to them that are clearly the parental unit.
Looks like violets, tastes like violets. I'm guessing it is violets.
So what do they do?
What do they do?
Can
And
they get
I'm
rid of the
guessing,
little
and
seedlings?
probably if those seedlings look like the violets, are probably seedlings of the violets. And so, if they're just the little seedlings, you can pull those if you want. That's a good way to do it. The larger ones, yes, you can pull, but they spread by rootstocks. And so, if you pull them, make sure you get the entire rootstock. And so lots of herbicides will control it, but in an ornamental bed like that, it might get a little dicey depending on what else is in the ornamental bed.
Okay.
So start with pulling it, or you could go with the glove of death with some kind of a broadleaf herbicide on those and just whip those on.
And would hoeing just bring up more seeds? Or-
Yeah, it's hard to say how long they've been in there, and so probably it wouldn't. Hoeing would help to get those rootstocks,
Okay,
but it's hard.
hard to say.
Yeah, it's hard to. Yeah, it wouldn't hurt. I'd start with hoeing first. Probably that's a better idea.
Excellent. Okay. All right, Kevin, you have pictures from a viewer in Grand Island who has actually 2 different roses. The first of these is actually a knockout that has black spots on the canes. She wonders what that is and what should she do about it. And this is pre-storm, so whether there's any green tissue left or not, who knows, but definitely something on the stems.
Well, the black spots appear to be on maybe it looks like a cane, or a canker rather, a dead limb. But there is a fungal disease called black spot of rose that mostly infects the leaves, but it can infect the canes, and that's what it looks like is going on there. It's black spot. I think you can just apply a general purpose fungicide for that. What you'll want to do for sure, though, is to remove any of the leaves that fall off during the summer or the fall. They harbor the fungus that causes those spots, so you want to get them out of the rose bed.
Okay, excellent. Jeff, yours is the next picture, and this is a viewer who has hydrangea. Oops, we have one more. I forgot, we have one more rose. If you guys want to throw that rose back up on the screen, that would be great, Gavin. And this one is actually a Tropicana rose.
It looks like it has an proliferation of thorns,
right.
which could definitely be a sign of rose rosette, which is a viral disease. To reduce the risk of that spreading to any of your other roses, I would rope that particular stem out.
Okay, excellent. All right, Jeff, now we have a hydrangea pruning question for you.
Okay.
This viewer says this one has never been pruned
Okay.
and wonders whether she should prune it now.
Yeah, I think she should. And looking at that, one of the things that sometimes we do with Annabelle hydrangea, a common practice is to take it down 6 to 8 inches tall, just kind of mow the whole thing down, clean it all up. And that works well. It flowers on new wood, so that works well. Sometimes a good idea would be to get out. It looks like there's a lot of dead in that crown of that plant, so I'd get the dead out and go ahead and cut them back, but I'd leave some of the stems up a little bit more, maybe 12 to 18 inches, so we develop some structure to the plant. Because sometimes we have, especially with Annabelle, we tend to develop these rather weak-stemmed plants, and they kind of lay over a lot. So.
All right, Jim, you get the next pictures, I do believe. And this is a viewer who had probably pussy willows from the looks of things, but certainly a willow, and had all sorts of these bumps on the leaves. Last year, this year they have just finished flowering. That's one of those early things that did well.
Right,
and they're wondering, should they expect them again? Can they spray for them?
Yeah, usually it looks to me like it's caused by a tiny little whitish mite, very microscopic in size, so you can't see it, but it's called an areophyid mite. And we have other mite problems in trees and shrubs in the landscape too that are caused by areophyid mites. In this case, most areophyid mites overwinter in the bud scales. Protective areas, maybe bark crevices or whatever. So I'm sure the bud scales would probably be the good candidates here. So they come out about the time everything starts to break open. They'll be coming out on a warm day, and then of course they'll be establishing themselves on that new foliage that comes out. I don't know what to say because most of the time they're not harmful in any way. They just look like acne or something, but so it's not going to harm the shrub. So you can bypass any kind of treatment if you want to. If you wanted to attempt to do it or something like that, and this is where you could pipe in a little bit when it's in that stage where it's just coming out, leafing out, the pussy willow. I don't know how susceptible it would be to something like an insecticidal soap, something that would kill the little mites as they crawl to their summer housing.
I would wonder if
I would
we would get. I suppose it depend on the temperatures.
You're right. Yeah.
If
Temperatures
it's a
can't be
cooler-
too hot with
Right.
most soaps.
Yeah.
Cool is okay,
Right.
All right.
but You can test it. Maybe if you want to test it and give it a try, but no harm to the shrub itself.
Okay, good. Zach, we have viewers that wonder about a rather large weed in the turf and in frontages and in the park. They wonder what it is. It's up that far already, and how can they control it?
Yeah, this is a perfect example of what we're dealing with all our really thin turf. That's curly dock, best I can tell from the picture. But looks like there's leaves on the ground, so yeah, it's probably the
Pin oak
Springs
leaves,
picture. Yeah, it is the Springs picture, and so perfect example. There's no competition there from the turf, and so the weeds are just going nuts. And so best way to control that was last fall. You can do it this spring once it warms up. You know, just after dandelion flowering, you could go in and try to control it then. It's okay, not perfectly effective like it would be in the fall. Just be really careful with all the non-target movement of you know, all the things that are growing in the garden and the red buds and everything else. And so that's why we prefer to spray it in the fall.
All
The other
right.
thing is, the other thing is, if you have seed in the ground, be careful with the herbicides that you choose.
Excellent. Thanks, Zach. Kevin, we're going to pick up where we left off. You have an image here. This is a viewer who sent an image of variegated Solomon seal, which is actually the Perennial Plant Association Plant of the Year. Had this last year and previous seasons. It seems to be getting worse. They're wondering, is this a rust of some sort, and what can they do?
It might be the lesions from a rust. If it is, right now, what you can do is, if it is the rust that I'm thinking of, it has two hosts that it has to complete its life cycle on, and the other hosts are some of our weed species, like our sedges and our dandelions. So weed control can help in this problem. But as of now, just make sure that there's good airflow in the canopy once the plant comes out and starts putting on foliage. That'll help reduce the standing water that the fungus needs for infection. I'm sure there are maybe some fungicide sprays available if infection is nasty enough.
All right.
warrant
Thanks,
that.
Kevin. All right, Jeff, you also have an image. This is a viewer in Lincoln who got this beautiful, beautiful plant. Nobody can figure out what it is. She wants to know.
We think it's a Streptocarpus, which is like a Cape Primrose is kind of that group. And that one, I believe, it sounded like she got it from her daughter as a gift. Concord Blue is a common one, a popular one. And so that's probably what it is, I would guess, since that seems to be one that's very popular.
Looked pretty similar, and it looked like she really was taking pretty good care of that
Yeah,
as well.
yeah.
Excellent. All right, Jim, we're out of images for right now, but we have an interesting iris question,
Okay.
sort of associated with the last one. This is in Greeley, Nebraska. She planted iris, and they were dug up by something and lying on the surface of the ground with the rhizomes sort of chewed on. Would that
Yeah.
be insecticidal or
No,
critter-wise?
I think that possibly could be a squirrel or maybe a vole or maybe one of those ground squirrels that would have done that, because there's a lot of storage in those, and so they provide nutrition not only for iris borer, but there's other possibilities.
All right, thanks, Jim. Zach, we had a viewer from Percival, Iowa, send us a sample, and it actually was neither rotten nor smelly. And she wondered what it was. It was in her perennial bed, and we kind of had a notion on that. Any idea?
Do you want? Are we going to show? They're going to show
Well,
the
kind of,
picture?
sort of, yeah.
Sort of show the picture. Looks like it's from the mallow family. Give me just a second to open it up, and yeah, it's safe. So I don't know how close you guys can get in on this, but this typical mallow leaf. If you get, there we go. Typical mallow leaf. Let me get it up here. There we go. Oops. And could be common mallow, but the way she explained it, it sounded like it was a perennial, and it's there all the time. Common mallow is usually an annual, so I'm guessing. I think Kim probably will chime in that this is some kind of an ornamental, and not a weed whatsoever.
But we'd we call it a garden thug.
A garden
if
thug.
you've
So
got
it
it,
would
you're
be a
gonna get
weed.
it.
A weed is anything out of place.
Right, yeah. Pretty,
So again, how to control it? Typical broadleaf herbicide.
Or
wicked
ho, ho,
on,
ho.
spray- or hold on. Yeah, hold would do it. Yep.
Yep, exactly. Thanks, Zach. Kevin, we have a question, the first of many, from Facebook, this one, on any thoughts on when we're going to see the morels this year?
That's a great Lauren question.
It is, so you could pass.
I'm going to pass because I would be making it up.
You only get one pass per night.
I get 2. I'm special. Please resubmit the question when Lauren will be on the panel.
But I would say, I mean, there always has to be a good rain preceding morels,
Right.
but
Moisture's the big
and
piece that-
you have to have a little bit of a warm up, but not too hot.
A couple days right around 70 would be nice.
It can't
Yeah.
be snowing.
Can't be snowing. Okay.
Right now, soil temperatures are somewhere, depending on the part of the state you're in, it's anywhere from 40 to 45, 46, and so that's way too cold for morels.
Yeah.
Best I would guess. I'm not a mushroom specialist.
Yeah, we all have little tidbits of morel knowledge, but Lauren's the master.
Okay.
Just ask him.
Yeah. Jeff, we have a viewer in Lincoln who has asked us a question about drought conditions, the severe drought conditions. They're in the country, hot, dry winds. They really would like to not use mulch. In the country, it just blows away, and they want to know, is there a ground cover alternative for that?
Okay.
Anything come to mind?
Well, I guess I'll give you my thoughts. If you have a perennial bed or an area where you have a tree and some perennials, let's say, and you have the mulch blowing through there as it dries up through the summer months, a couple ideas would be to use a ground cover, and it's hard. A lot of our ground covers like shadier moisture conditions. So something like, there are some low-growing sedums would be a good choice. There's a creeping phlox, another one that will handle a lot of sun and kind of a little bit of abuse and still kind of keep kicking at you. There's some lower growing shrubs you might want to consider. Bronx forsythia is a low growing shrub. It's flowering really nice on campus right now. There's some low growing
Sand cherry.
sand cherry, yeah, that's a good one. Anyway, so there's some low growing shrubs, and that's what my thought would be. Or even put your perennials around the outside of the bed, mulch in the middle, so that way they're kind of catching some of that stuff and preventing it from going out.
All right, Jim, we have a question for you. This is an interesting one, and it actually has a little bit of pathology associated with it, Kevin. It's a viewer in Norfolk who had a terrible problem with phlox plant bug, and once they controlled them, then they had powdery mildew, so it was sort of a disaster. Found a product called Rose RX, which is a systemic dual action drench labeled for both insects and diseases. They wonder if those dual action products are something that we would recommend.
Well, on the insecticide side, I assume that's imidacloprid. That's probably the ingredient there, and that would be perfectly suitable for phlox plant bugs because they use sucking mouth parts to tap into the vascular system of the plant and the leaf tissue. So that would work if that imidacloprid were applied earlier in the season. I would say probably when we get it the early part of May.
It doesn't seem like the best way though for the fungicide when we're talking in terms of powdery mildew. You're going to want a foliar spray for coverage if you have infection bad enough to treat. Plus the products that they use in systemic fungicides might not be labeled for the powdery mildew fungus. You might need to use a foliar applied.
And then what about breaking up maybe the foliage itself is just a little bit too dense or something?
Well, exactly, yeah. If you can
phlox.
increase airflow and exposure to the sun, that's going to reduce the amount of powdery mildew as well.
All right, excellent, gentlemen. Zach, this is a question about pre-emergence and fertilizer. Do they still need to wait till May to put down pre-emergence and pre-emergent fertilizer? They're talking about both of those in the same sentence.
Yeah, because normally most of the products that you can buy at the retail level have the granular products have a pre-emergent on a fertilizer. And throughout most of Nebraska, if you're only going to make one application, the ideal timing for that is more or less the first week of May, give or take a week. If you are going to make two applications, which is really the best way to control crabgrass now, literally statewide, the timing on that first application isn't as critical, but the second application normally is about the first or second week of June. And so you'd use the same amount of product, you just split the application in half. And so bottom line is if you're going to make one application, you have until first week of May or so.
All right, thanks, Zach. Kevin, you have also a picture here. This is a viewer who has Turley Winesap apples, which is actually a good fruiting apple. 15 years old, noticed this appearing on the trunk and is in a panic mode.
They shouldn't be. I think that's just the natural shagging of the bark that happens on those trees. That they exfoliate, kind of like our human skin. I don't worry that it's a canker. If it was a canker, you would see instead of it being a lighter color, it would be a darker color or sunken. I don't think they have anything to worry about.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right, I think you also have a picture, Jeff.
Okay.
This is a viewer who was fortunate enough to have hardy chrysanthemums that really are.
Yeah.
And they left the dead foliage standing on some of these and cut it back on others, and now they're seeing these new plants, new shoots. Should they cut back the rest, and can they transplant and divide, or do they need to wait a bit?
Yes, cut back the dead. That's right, and clean things up. Get the leaves out of there. If you want to get in there with your hands, I mean, things are nice and moist, and things are delayed, so we have time to do some dividing. If they can tease out some plants and transplant some of those, that would be fine.
All right, excellent. Thanks so much. And it is fun to finally get some that are maybe hardy some places.
Yeah.
Dale Lindgrens are hardy. Just a reminder to him, if he's listening, that we want him to keep producing those things. All right, Jim, this is a viewer who has pines, not sure what kind they are, various sizes. They're not saying where they are. Started dropping needles, but they're looking and they've discovered that some of the bark is sloughing, and there are cocoons under the bark, little cocoons under the bark. They're wondering, is that, how do they figure out what that is, and then what do they do about that?
Yeah, there could be multiple things going on there. You know, the pine needles that are dropping off possibly could suggest spider mites, like spruce spider mites, if that occurred in the latter part of the spring last year. And maybe the trees themselves are also being set back with the way we had the drought conditions as well this year. So as far as the little cocoons, I'm not quite sure.
Picture?
Yeah, we would need a picture there. I can't think of any little insect that would make cocoons. Little bark beetles, when a tree is stressed, would have little resinous. There'd be little bleedings of resin or pitch in the bark crevices themselves. So yeah, we need a picture, I think.
All right, excellent.
It's not it could be an insect that's not damaging and just harboring there.
Well, I don't know. The bark beetles themselves are just kind of like suggestive of the demise and the weak state of the trees. And so, yeah, it could be some insect that's just using the bark crevices just as protection for overwintering.
Or not.
Or not. I'm a turf guy.
Sure, picture.
You're a turf guy. Okay, turf guy, we have a question from Omaha, which is it beneficial to apply lime to a bluegrass lawn? If so, when? And is there a waiting period between applying it and putting down other things?
The only time I would ever consider applying lime to a lawn is if you have a soil test that tells you have a pH lower than probably 6 or below. So in Nebraska, that's very, very rare. And I would not apply lime unless we're on the other side, we have pH that's too high. And so unless you have a soil test that tells you to apply lime, don't apply it.
All right.
If you do have a soil test, you can apply it spring or fall, and it's always more effective if you aerify first.
All right. Thank you so much. Okay, Kevin, this is a walnut question. And there's actually 2 or 3 walnut questions in association with this. But the first one is, this is a Big Springs viewer. And are they anywhere near the area where we are seeing thousand cankers? And what is the update on that particular?
Yeah, so far the disease I believe is restricted to the southwestern parts of Colorado, and it's coming in from the south and west. It has not gotten to Nebraska yet, or Montana or Wyoming. I don't think it's that far north.
Okay.
Southwest part of Colorado, there's still a quarantine on any kind of walnut products coming in and out of the state, or firewood. You can't move walnut at all through Nebraska currently.
All right.
But they should. If they're up there, they should. I don't believe it's that far north yet.
Okay, Jeff, we're kind of time limited here, but also a walnut question. A viewer has too many walnuts and wants to know what can they spray their tree with to keep them from producing walnuts.
You know, I'm not familiar with anything that you can spray to reduce fruit on that. I know that there are some insecticides that will kind of interfere
with pollination.
Yeah, but I'm not really sure.
But don't they vacillate year to year? Some years
They
you
do.
have lots,
That's
and other
right.
years you may not.
Yeah.
Right, and I don't know that I've ever heard of, I think 7 is typically one of the ones that's
Yeah,
suggested.
it has been. I haven't heard of that as being
No,
a.
especially not on walnuts.
Yeah.
And I would assume that if you're getting a walnut with walnuts, that somebody would
They're so
want the
highly
walnuts.
valued, yeah.
That's right.
yeah.
That might be a better way to approach that rather than trying to keep it from fruiting.
Make some muffins.
Make muffins, or just eat them.
Or just
That's
eat them.
e-
Something.
That's
We'll put the
easier.
walnuts into muffins. That was
Yes.
my point.
Yes, exactly.